All right. Hello, everybody. We'll give everybody just a second to get their audio situated. But thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Hannah. I am an admissions specialist here at App Academy, and so I help students go through our admissions process. And I am joined today by some wonderful alumni from App Academy who are going to be talking us through their experience and answering all of your questions. So whoever would like to jump in first, James, Tim, whoever wants to jump in, introduce yourself.
Sure, I'll jump in. Hi, my name is Tim Bedford. I graduated from a New York App Academy cohort, though remote, in December of last year. I got a job at the beginning of April. And so, yeah, I've been working there for about 5 months now, under 5 months, for a company called Pickup, which does it's like a gig economy kind of like app development company. It does delivering large furniture.
Awesome. James?
Cool. Hey, everybody. My name is James. I am based in San Jose, California. I graduated from the in-person cohort in San Francisco, but because it was during COVID, it was more or less remote. But I graduated June 2020, and I've been working at a company called Affirm here. And I'm coming up on my half-year mark. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, for folks who are just joining us, we are going to be doing a Q&A. I'm going to be asking some questions to our lovely alumni here. But if you have any specific questions that you would like to ask them, we are going to be using a form called Slido. And so I just posted it in the chat. Go ahead and open that up and take a look at it. And you can post any questions that you have in there, and I will reference it back to our alumni so they can answer those questions. So don't need to post in the Zoom chat, go straight to the Slido and I'll be watching it and I can, get them to answer any questions that you have as we're going through our time here today. So first off, what I wanted to start off with, basic question. A lot of these folks are folks who are thinking about joining App Academy. They might be going through the admissions process or just looking at it. What made you want to attend App Academy? What got you here?
Sure, I can jump in with that. So basically, I was not working as a software engineer beforehand, but I'd studied classes and did some classes in undergrad, self-studied, did some projects by myself. I was looking for work and I was having trouble though. And then COVID hit and all this stuff. And I was like, everything was kind of directionless. And family basically was like, why don't you do some classes? And I was like, I don't know if I want to do undergrad classes like somewhere. And I was like, why don't you, like, what else do you want to do? I'm like, oh, how about a boot camp? And I was thinking, I'm like, yeah, it sounds like a good idea. So yeah, I just looked around online and just picked a couple. I applied to two and got in and I ended up picking App Academy.
Cool. Yeah, I guess from my point of view, I had two good friends that graduated from App Academy way back in the day, probably like 2017, 2016-ish. And they're both super good engineers at big companies now. It's like Instagram and Uber. And they highly recommended the process. Plus, it worked for them. They're both like bio degrees, my college friends. And so I figured if they could do it, I could do it. I did not I did not try other boot camps just because my two good friends had already gone through and succeeded with App Academy. So I just went directly to it.
Awesome. And so can you both tell me a little bit about what was your background before applying? Did you have a degree? Did you have coding experience? What was that like?
Yeah, sure. I had a degree. It was in like a kind of like a create your own degree, kind of liberal arts program. So it was a mixture of like music and like computer music. It was partly programming, but only a part of it. It wasn't a full CS degree at all. And I've done a few courses in that undergrad. I did projects by myself. So I had, of the people in my cohort, I definitely had more experience than the average person. Um, but yeah, so it was a slightly different experience. But yeah, that's just what I came into it with it.
Yeah, for me, I had 1 quarter's worth of classes in college. I graduated college in 2013. So in 2012, I took 10 weeks of Python. Um, that was it. My my background is in finance. I worked for 4 years as a financial advisor. Um, and then for the 3 years immediately after that, I quit my job and I traveled. So I had zero background coming into it.
Got it. Do you feel like, I know Tim, you mentioned that it was kind of a different experience than some of the people who you were in class with. Who were kind of your cohort mates? Did a lot of folks have, background experience? Were most folks changing careers? What was that like?
There was one person I think who's in my final MERN project. Is a really good guy, Jared. He had a CS degree. I'm pretty sure he was the only person in our cohort of like 40 some people who had actually had a CS degree. Um, so several other people who like me have done a few projects and something like that, had some sort of experience. But I would say 2/3 probably at least had zero experience at all with programming. And that was nice. It was nice having a nice sort of mixture of people of different experiences. Because also it showed you like I would have a problem and I'd be like, I would get stuck with something. Someone else who had no experience, like a month into it, would do something like, oh yeah, I forgot this all kind of boils down to problem solving, really in the end. It's not just experience. It's really like, how can you think well? So a lot of people who come into it were people who may not have had the experience, but were definitely like the problem solvers that you need to be a software engineer.
Yeah, I'd probably about the same ratio. I think right off the top of my head, there's maybe like 5 to 10 people that were just rock stars because they had previous experience building projects or doing something else. I think I was probably lower middle of the pack. Um, and then, yeah, our cohort size was probably about 40, I think 44 people. So you figured 10 out of 44 had some kind of experience and everybody else is just jumping in.
Awesome. That's good to hear. I know a lot of folks who are looking at App Academy right now and who are probably here have no experience in coding and they want to know that this is something that might be an option for them. So good to hear both of your experiences there. As far as the actual program itself, what it was like, tell me about what your day looked like. So when you woke up, whatever you did before you actually attended class, what class was like, and then what you did after, and kind of what was your day to day like?
It was pretty packed with App Academy. I mean, you don't. It's funny. Someone towards the end of the cohort, right before we graduated, someone asked, like, "Is our jobs gonna be like this intense?" And one of our cohort instructors was like, "No, this if a job is this intense, that's not good. This is meant to be much more intense than what you should be worked. Like, you spend most of your day in class, and then the evening you'll spend a good chunk of it doing homework. Um, Definitely not all of your time. It's not like that much, but you should expect to spend most of your time doing in class or doing work because you're cramming a lot of knowledge in a short amount of time, basically. Like, yeah, I got up in the morning, had breakfast, quickly jumped on. Um, we had our classes in the morning, then we had pair programming for several hours in the afternoon, hopped off, and I don't know, in those hours after in the evening, I would maybe do, I think in the beginning it'd be like 1 hour of homework, and towards the end it'd be more like 2, sometimes 3 hours of homework of just, and it was really fun. That's the part of it. It was that, I mean, it's a grind, but like it's enjoyable learning things so fast. So that made it a lot easier. But that's pretty much the daily schedule was, yeah, just a lot of just jumping in.
Um, yeah, very similar schedule. Although I think one notable difference, kind of towards the end of the days. But yeah, the full schedule for me would have been, yeah, wake up probably like 8 or something, get breakfast, and then just this was when we were remote, studied or yeah, take the classes and then pair for the rest of the day through about 5. And then I personally made sure to get out of the house. Like 5 o'clock hit, turn my computer off. I have to go to run, go play some basketball, do something. But then probably like 7 or 8, we would come back online and we actually asked App Academy to open like a separate channel for our cohort. And so probably about 7 or 8 folks would trickle back in, and then we would pair program for the homework or like, do some stuff together. But it was very interactive between my cohort mates and I. And we would probably do that until I'd say like 10 or 11 p.m. Before folks trickled off to bed. But that's probably very consistent couple of weeks.
Got it. And speaking of, we have some questions from the chat as well who want to know a little bit more about the remote learning experience and what that was like. Was it a challenge? Were there things that you had to kind of overcome in being remote and learning online? How did you feel about the remote experience? Did you feel like you got enough help? And what was that like?
I thought I got enough help. I mean, I think the main thing about remote stuff, the biggest challenge or the most draining part of it is you do pair programming in the afternoons, which is a great activity. Even my company right now, we do pair programming somewhat because it's just a good way for people to learn with each other. When you're pair programming through Zoom, there's people talk about the sort of Zoom effect, the drain over the course of the day. That becomes even bigger when you're trying to focus together and collaborate coding. It can be draining. That's probably the biggest detrimental effect of the the having that remote experience. But otherwise, no. I mean, the instructors were everything was set up very well, very clear ways of getting instructors' attention. People just hang out together in different rooms. So it kind of had a pretty good version of what you might experience. I don't know, I didn't have it in person, but I imagine that kind of experience. People would hang out all the time also in the Slack. Someone made a Discord and a lot of us would hang out there. So we definitely had a real nice sort of nice experience. But I mean, it was set up I think they changed their style for being remote pretty quickly. So there weren't too many hiccups. It's mostly just the draining thing of just being on a Zoom call for like most of your day. It is what it is.
Yeah. So I signed up for the San Francisco in-person cohort, and we went in person for 1 week before the entire city shut down. And so that was nice. I'd say the difference was like that 1 week, you get to see everybody and like interact, which is definitely a plus and is really fun. But comparing that week to the remainder of the program, which was full remote, I'd say there's not too big of a difference in terms of what you learn or how you learn it. It's kind of the same. You break out into your small rooms. I would say, if anything, the remote kind of prepares you a lot more for the current work situation. I currently work in a team of 5. I've met them for like probably 2 hours one day. I just decided to go to the office. And then most of the team just decided to relocate in the last week or so. So everybody's all over the country now. I have almost 0% chance of seeing my team ever again. But that's the reality of it. So I'd say full remote is very closely mirroring the workforce.
Absolutely. And all of App Academy is pretty much remote right now too. So this isn't an office. This is my bedroom, as you can tell. But I know, James, you mentioned that you had friends who attended App Academy, and I assume they did the actual in-person course. Did you have any kind of did you talk with them at all about what that experience was like? Did they say anything like any kind of comparison between both of your experiences?
So my friends did App Academy so early on in the process, 2016, 17. That was back when App Academy was sponsoring housing. And so they would stay like on campus with their cohort mates, and they would like rent a room from App Academy. Yeah, and that was just wild to me that was even a thing back then. But I think that was the biggest difference. Material wise, I think when I went through the curriculum, it started off pretty much half Ruby, half JavaScript. I think when they did it, also it was a lot less structured. And I would imagine that even now it's more structured than when I went through the process.
Yeah, good to hear that perspective. I know you both mentioned that you spent a lot of time of your day coding. How did you manage stress? Like I know James, you mentioned that you would make sure that you shut down your computer at 5 and you went and did something. Did either of you have any specific ways that you like when you got stressed? How did you manage it?
I mean, one, I would say I did not do what James did of having a ritual like that, and that was a bad idea. I think it is really important to have some way of giving yourself time to get away from the computer. Um, yeah, definitely do that. I think, I was pretty consistent about when I ate dinner, whenever I did, just having a clear routine of a schedule. Um, I think was just really important for me. That was just the biggest thing. Just to make because it is a grind and you have to fit in. They tell you at the beginning all the time, like, this is not a sprint, it's a journey. Like, if you treat it like a sprint, you will burn out in like a month or two at most. Like, you can't treat it that way. So yeah, you just gotta, I'm trying to think most of really stressed. I mean, part of it is that your app mates are also probably as stressed as you. So it is really nice to be able to just like talk to them, and that bonding will actually make it, one will be, you'll be friends, which will be nice, but also it'll just make it a lot easier because you're with a bunch of people who are in the same boat. Um, you're just dealing with the same thing, and I think that's the biggest thing. And all you guys could also share tips about what you're doing to manage that stress. Your cohort mates will be your biggest asset, for camaraderie and just knowledge sharing.
Yeah, definitely agree. I'd say, yeah, find a hobby, find an activity, go outdoors. That was probably really important. It was during COVID, so I had like started a garden. So I remember like just going outside consistently at some point in the day. That was really nice. Um, yeah, besides that, I think a point to pull back from what Tim was saying earlier, it's actually fun, kind of at some point. Like once you stop focusing on the technical stuff and like go back to high level and figure out what you're trying to accomplish and like really think about your goals, it kind of does become fun. And if you can get that mentality switch, probably takes a few weeks, but once you're there, like I'd say a lot of the stress goes away a little bit. Um, you start enjoying the errors and the bugs. You're like, oh, what's next? Yeah. But yeah, once that mentality change or shift happens, you are golden.
Awesome. As far as the actual class time itself, I know you mentioned that there's the time in the mornings for lecture and like asking questions, and then you do pair programming. What was pair programming like? Some of the folks in here might not be too familiar with it. Is it something that you still use? How did you feel about it? Was it difficult? What was it like to do pair programming and working with other students?
I like I liked it a lot. Pair programming is basically when there's different like ways you can do it exactly, but basically one of you is driving, and I can't remember the exact terminology. One of you is basically is the brains behind the operation, basically, or the main person thinking about the wider strategy, what exactly is happening, what approaches you're taking, and one person is typing. Um, and there can be different lines about how much control you're giving each person, but basically that's what you're doing, and you swap out at set periods of time. And App Academy is 15 minutes, I believe, and that could be in the middle of a problem. And I had some people at the beginning who'd be like, "Oh, do you want to just swap prop? Do you want to just like I'll do a problem and then we'll swap roles for the next problem?" And I would say, "No way. I think the point of this activity, part of the benefit of this is that it makes it so that you have to follow the other person's train of thought if you're halfway through a problem, which is a really beneficial skill." Pair programming, it feels really awkward at first, but like it makes you a much better communicator. That's the biggest thing for me, is it helped me to communicate with people. You're going to be working with a lot of different people. I think I only have one or two people in my cohort who I didn't end up working with at some point. So you will work with everyone, and it's almost everyone, and it's a really useful experience to be able to understand how do I communicate with this person, because we're all a little different the way that we communicate. Um, like I said earlier, it's kind of draining in a remote way. However, VS Code does have nice plugins that make it easier than it would have been 5 years ago. So yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing, is try to embrace it as much as possible for what it is. Don't try to get around it. Like really like dive into it and what is expected. Enjoy changing roles. Enjoy yeah. I mean, in my job, we actually, because it's part of a whole philosophy called extreme programming. It's like, which came out of the programming world like 20 years ago. And yeah, the CTO and my chief person is basically trying to get us to do that actually in the company more, because it's actually a really great way to share skills. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, one thing that I do remember before joining App Academy's program was actually like the pairing. Same question. I asked somebody else, and they're like, "Yeah, dude, don't worry about it. It's totally important. Like, you very 100% need to learn it." And then coming into the cohort, coming into the classes, you realize like, sometimes you go a little bit slower, especially if you're the kind of person that like just wants to take charge and like, do everything yourself. But there is so much value in being able to communicate with your partner, especially across a computer screen. The idea of pair programming is like, you would basically tell somebody on the other side of the screen what to type, and you just keep changing that role. And the current work equivalent is that if you're ever in a bug with your anywhere in your code, anywhere with your team, and you have to hop on a Zoom and you have to pair, like to have that experience in App Academy to pull off of is actually really, really important. Going through the job search process too, it was definitely asked a lot. Like, can you pair? And when you said yes, it's like, all right, good.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to add one thing is that I think some curriculums at boot camps will have a thing where you'll work on a half-done project, and App Academy doesn't do that. But I think what it does do of replicating that feeling though is, yeah, because in real life you're going to be reading much more code than you'll actually be writing. App Academy, you end up writing a lot more code, but it replicates that in that feeling of, okay, what's that person doing? How are they thinking? Because you're going to have to, when you're working a job, you're going to be working on projects where you have no idea what the thought process is. Sometimes what they're doing is actually a really good way. You just don't know it. Sometimes they did a poor architectural decision, but there simply isn't enough time to just change everything. So you have to learn how someone else is thinking. That's like so crucial to be able to be like, okay, this is the architecture, this is the style of doing whatever. I'm going to work with it and be that same style, because you have to.
Awesome point there. Yeah. And speaking of, I know, James, you kind of transitioned to this a little bit, but the job search is a huge part of the whole point of App Academy, helping you find a position in software engineering. From the kind of the very beginning, what happens after you finish the 16 weeks? What are you doing? What's the transition period like? What happens after that?
Yeah, I can start this. So the last couple of weeks of the curriculum is your projects, making sure that your projects are in line and your projects are the things that recruiters, that employers will see. So once the curriculum officially ends, you still have to finish your projects. And so I was stuck in that limbo for like I'd say like 3 weeks to a month, where I had to finish these projects, and that's totally on you. Like, there's no teacher or other source of drive other than yourself trying to get out of this like limbo. Once you finish your projects, your resume's up, then you start applying. You're given a career coach who, I think in my case, my career coach had something like 15, 20 other students. And you just have daily check-ins. You do have, I guess, like thresholds to meet as you apply. So for us, that threshold is set by your career coach, if I remember. And I think my threshold was like, I had to make 25 job applications per week, while at the same time completing all these like little leak code exercises. And at the same time, like trying to talk to recruiters, trying to outreach and do all this stuff, attending events. So there's structure in that way, but you are mostly free. and where you end up is mostly like up to your connections and how far you're willing to go, how far you're willing to push yourself, really.
Yeah, I maybe had, I think 2.5 weeks also of time after I finished to finish up my projects. So I did that. It also ranges a lot between the cohort. Someone in my final projects took like 2 months to do more. You probably shouldn't lean towards that, but someone else did it pretty much immediately. He got a job. He just worked so fast. There's a whole range of how people do it. It's usually somewhere between one week and a month, I think is pretty common. Yeah, and it's, I mean, as James was saying, like it really becomes way less structured and becomes really more like, all right, it's your time to decide how you can do this. Your career coach gives you these goals, and they will change it for you. As it seems like, okay, you're doing a little bit too much leak code. Let's do more applications. You're doing too much, or maybe you do. Let's change this approach as you talk to them more about what. It's really important also to be honest with them about like, here's what I'm doing, here's what's working, not be like, oh, because it's much more helpful to, they're there to help you. That's their whole job. So yeah, you just end up having conversations with them a lot to sort of figure out what's going on. And yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is you just kind of just grind it out, but and have, even more important than during the classes, is you have to find your coping mechanisms. I did not do well. I kind of dropped like hobbies and stuff like that. I became very obsessed. Like I have to keep doing this. That was not good. It's really important to just have it be more of a do something each day and just have a rhythm to it. Because it will be kind of demoralizing when those rejections come in at the beginning. But you know, it makes you hardier. You learn how to you embrace the grind.
And speaking of rejections, so like James was saying, 25 applications per week, tallying it out, that's a lot of applications. That's a lot of rejections that you're getting from folks. How do you handle that? I know you mentioned coping mechanisms. What's your way of handling rejection, and how did that happen during your job search process with your career coach as you were going through it? What was the rejection like? How did you handle it?
I think the main thing for me is, one, keep doing other work on your projects, even if they're like done, like your coaches, everything approved them, like, okay, this is good to be on a resume. Still keep working on the projects, because that gives you something to work towards, and be like, you know what, fine, if they reject me, fine, I'm making this thing, and make it really personally involved in it. And that just for self-esteem and just having fun. Remember that this isn't about, if you're doing mostly applications at this point, you're doing it to be a developer. So have fun, embrace that. Do, as I think James mentioned earlier, do leak code problems, and have fun with them. Don't think purely in the interview sense. Just try to like think about algorithms. And I think mostly doing a lot of fun things like as part of your daily thing is really important to remind yourself, this is why I'm doing it. I enjoy doing this process. The rejections, I mean, the biggest thing is, I mean, you're gonna get a lot of unhelpful rejections, just very like, they won't tell you anything. And it's just frustrating. Sometimes they will give you actual good feedback and take it to heart, be like, okay, well, this is what I need to improve on. And I think just look for patterns in how you're being rejected. Because it can be clear, like, okay, because there's always something to improve. There's something, don't be like, okay, well, they don't like me. It's like, no, it's just a tough process. Look at your resume, talk to your career coach, and you'll find things to tweak. That's the thing, is just think about improvements the whole time. Don't let it, because it's not a personal thing. It's a tough thing to break into, and that's all it is. It doesn't anything about your character or your coding skills, really.
Yeah, it's a numbers game. People say it, people probably say that all the time, actually, from now until whenever you guys get a job as an engineer. It'll always be a numbers game. For me, I think at some point the rejections just, you kind of get numb to it. Even today, the funny part is, like, even today I get rejections. And I've been employed for like 5+ months now. I'm getting like rejected from, like, I don't know, YouTube summer 2020 internship program. Like, come on, man. Like, that just kind of tells you that it's really just, yeah, don't take it too seriously. I'd say, yeah, definitely, like Tim said, have a passion project after you graduate. Um, you know, a lot of it's on you to like improve your time or improve yourself with the time that you have. And then just also pro tip, one question that I got consistently from companies during interviews was, what have you done outside your projects? What have you done since you graduated? 100% of everybody has asked me that question. So that should tell you kind of what your post-graduation, like, I guess, where you should be putting your energy, you know?
And we did have a student ask, how do you feel the projects kind of prepared you for getting a job? Like, do you feel like those projects were you competing kind of on level with, some of the other folks who were applying that didn't attend a boot camp? What was it like looking for a job with those projects that you got from App Academy?
So we have 3 projects. We have a full stack project. We have a MERN project, which is, I won't go to the acronym, but basically it's a group project, and we have a solo JavaScript project. And each of those, I think, gives a little bit different of something to show and to have some experience talking about. The solo project is basically just like, look at me, I made a cool sort of presentation, and that can just wow some people because it's like, oh, it looks nice. The group project, I think, helped a lot for basically giving you a lot of experience with talking about how you work with other people. Because it's so important working with other people as a developer in a company. I think the group project will give you a lot of talking points about how I worked with people, how I organized my time, how I communicate, how I do things through GitHub and everything. That helps a lot. And the full stack project for me helped with just because I came to the course doing a lot of small projects, but not doing very many big things, I guess. And the full stack is, you think about the front end, the back end, the data, you think about all of it, the presentation, and it gives you a really good way to talk about. One, will give you a lot, you're going to run into some challenges at some point, which would be good anecdotes to bring up. But also it gives you a real good idea of how to architect a large project. And that's really important, to be able to talk about, yeah, this is how I thought about this at the micro and the macro view. I think that's the biggest helpful thing is it gives you a range of different things to talk about. Some just things to talk about. A lot of times people enter interviews without. I can't imagine doing a lot of interviews without having that experience of having these projects to talk about, because you gives you just so much to just like fill in.
Yeah, I mean, an interview without my project would just be like, "Hi, I'm James. Nice to meet you." Yeah, I'd say the project is what makes you stand out as a developer, as anybody that's ever interested in tech in any capacity, especially because we're kind of going a non-traditional education route. What else do you have to show that you have the understanding, right? If not your projects. But also, I think the word project itself is a little bit misleading. Coming into App Academy, I remember thinking, oh, it's just a project. Like, I didn't even know what the full term was or what it meant. But coming out of it, I'd say your first project that you do by yourself, your full stack, that could pretty much just be a standalone company. You be able to build a standalone website company, Netflix, Airbnb, whatever. That is a project. And then your MERN stack is also a company. Imagine building Facebook with 3 buddies. That's a project. And that's not a small deal by any means.
Awesome. Good to hear. And then as far as your job search, overall, how long did it take you to find your first job? How long did it take you to get that first offer that you accepted?
Mine was a little over 2 months. Yeah, I think I got all my things approved in late January, and I got the sort of a cruel way, on April 1st, I got my job telling me, yeah, we want you. So a little over 2 months.
Yeah, I took the long way route. I took the scenic route here. I graduated in, I think we finished in June or July 2020, which is a perfect mid-COVID. Nobody knew what was going to happen. So the entire summer classes for like Google, Facebook, Apple, whatever, they were all told to go home or deferred for years. I think Uber just let off like 2,500 people. Airbnb let off a couple thousand people too. That was all within like 3 months after I finished. So yeah, I was in the full job hunt. I got my offer probably late March 2021 this year. And so you figured total time wise, probably like 8 months. If I'm doing, yeah, 8, 9 months if I'm doing the math right.
And now that we are kind of at the end of this journey and you've started your own journey as software engineers, take us through what you do now. What is your job and what does it require, and how did App Academy kind of get you prepared for that?
Sure. So I work, I think I mentioned at the beginning, as a software engineer at a company called Pickup. It's like Uber Eats kind of thing, but for like large items basically. And what I do, I came into the company right as they're wrapping halfway through a whole new app, because the old app was kind of buggy, and no one on that current tech team had worked on it. So they and the person who I'm working with now, who created a prototype, was like, "Hey, want to do this?" Like, "Oh, sure, let's make this new app." Made it in React Native. So it was very helpful for me. I was one of the people who came in. They were like, what things do you know?" And I'm like, "What this is like React." I'm like, "Oh, great." So I immediately jumped in to the app development part. I'm still one of the main people working on the app right now. So that React knowledge helped a whole lot. Because I was able to, React Native is not, its underlying is different, but like what you're actually working with on the code level is really extremely similar. So that was super helpful, just for that just raw skill. I think they mentioned at one point in the course to say like, I know React or Redux is at the end of the course, but don't sleep on this. This is one of the most important skills you're going to learn, and it really is a marketable skill. So yeah, I mean, my company is planning on helping me just jump into different areas. Most of their stack is in C#, like the .NET framework. So I'm working on that a little bit. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else with that. I mean, the collaborational stuff, like I mentioned before, with pair programming, it really does help a lot. Like, because you're gonna be, obviously, I'm working remote with people, and you got to be good at communicating, whether through Slack or directly on Zoom, talking to people. I think yeah, I would say a mixture of one, the raw skill from React, various other small little skills sprinkled about, and generally how to work independently in a remote environment. I think those are the biggest things App Academy gave me.
Yeah. So I am not a software engineer by title. My full title is a developer support engineer, which means that I don't create code as much as Tim does, but I probably read equivalent amount. So I spend most of my day, yeah, I guess like reading other people's JavaScript code on the front end, or if I were to create code, it would be mostly in SQL. Affirm is a huge company, so every team like does their own little thing, and I'm just totally not involved in any of like the behind the scenes stuff. But yeah, that said, like, I need to understand how to do all this stuff with GitHub, how to interact, how to like not mess up my company. I'd say the most important thing is that App Academy taught me how to learn. So for example, in my class, it was Ruby and JavaScript, but yeah, this company is entirely written in Python. So, just juggling that, learning Python, realize that like once you learn your first two languages, the third one's so much easier. I think that's the biggest skill. Yeah, I think we might have deviated a little from the original question. Yeah.
No, those are really, really good examples of things that ultimately we want to know kind of what got you prepared for the current job that you have right now. And so that perfectly answered it. And I mean, is there anything else that you would like to tell students who are interested in App Academy? Anything that we haven't covered that you feel like they should know?
I mean, just have fun with it. Like, I don't know, like just jump into it. It's a really intense, interesting experience. You learn a lot really quickly. As James mentioned, you learn how to learn a lot of programming concepts that's really important, to be able to learn how to learn. Yeah, it was a really fun experience. I really enjoyed that, having that for my fall. I just learned so much, and I mean, yeah, like I needed that. I needed I needed to take that course to get me to the point that I could get a job. Both for having a financial reason, like, hey, if you help apply to jobs, you owe us money now, kind of a thing. To have like that fire under me to apply to jobs, that helped a lot, to be honest. But also, yeah, just those skills made me a better developer.
Yeah, I think as a closing remark, the last thing I would say is that it's worth it. Yeah, going to the boot camp, grinding out the hours with your cohort mates, spending late nights updating resume version 35. It's all worth it at the end. It is all worth it.
Well, that is some wonderful closing remarks. Thank you so much for that. I know we had a question in the chat about this recording. Yes, this is being recorded. And so this will be available. If you talk to your admission specialist, reach out to them. Or if you don't have an admission specialist, apply and get one. And we can give you the recording for this. And I mean, after this, like, you are welcome to, if you haven't submitted an application yet, these folks are telling you, go ahead, go do it. Now is the time to do it. Now is the time to become a software engineer if it's something you're passionate about. But we are here. If you have any questions, our admissions team can answer any questions about the program or anything like that. So feel free to reach out to us with anything you need. And that is it, guys. We are going to wrap it up here. We do have these alumni sessions about every other week or so. So using the same Eventbrite that you use to register for this, you can register for another one if you'd like to see some more people talk about their experience at App Academy. And we will give a final thank you to our alumni. Thank you so much for joining us and for answering all of our lovely questions we were pestering you with. And I will let everybody enjoy the rest of their evening. Tim, especially for you, because it's like 9 o'clock there. So
yeah, no sun, and also having Flux on my computer has given me a kind of a really evil glow. I apologize for that, but it is what it is.
No problem. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today, and we hope you have a really good rest of your evening. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.